Welcome to the Mile High Church Podcast. This is Josh Reeves, and if you ever get anything from listening to our talks, I hope it's to build a daily spiritual practice. Mile High Church is proud to offer many guided meditations via the Insight Timer app, as well as on YouTube. Visit milehighchurch.org for direct links. So to begin today, I'd like to play a little game. Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay, so I call it the spiritual fill-in-the-blank game. And so I'm going to start the phrase, and you're going to fill in the blank with exactly where you are. So just honestly. So the first one is life is fill in the blank. Anybody?
Magical.
Magical. What else am I hearing? Wonderful, evolving, even busy, difficult. There we go. Challenging. Life is hard sometimes. Yeah, great. A journey. Good. It's weird. This last year and a half has been weird, right? I'm always thinking I'm going to be up here with Dr. Marcel saying, now that the aliens have landed, we wanted to announce, holding a high consciousness of just anything. Okay, here's the next one. I am fill in the blank.
Grateful.
Happy, grateful, overwhelmed, stressed, filled, whole, uncertain, beautiful. The next one is, my work is fill in the blank. Never ending. Great clarity here from the front row. What else? My work is rewarding, uncertain, yet to be started. All right. Great, good. And then the last one, my relationship is fill in the blank. Be careful, spouses, partners, what you say. Terrific. Does he get brownie points, Linda, for that? Good. Open, magnificent. Yeah, challenging but worth it, right? Supportive. Good. These are so important, and here's the game. So I like to fill in those blanks for myself, totally honestly, exactly where they are, and then I like to sit with the first part of the phrases, you'll see them coming up on the screen here, and actually take away the blanks completely, and just say the phrases, and see how they feel. So will you do that with me? Life is. I am. I just am. My work is. My relationship is. And when I do that, not all the time, but a lot of time, it's amazing how these statements are kind of complete in themselves. That there's something powerful about stepping back from the story, as valid or as invalid as it is that I'm in, just to step back. Just to get back to square one and experience these things as they are. God is. Life is. My purpose is. My relationship is. And it gives me an opportunity to fill in a new blank if I want. To step into a new way or to unveil a greater truth of what can be. You know, the topic of today's message is last story standing. And let me put it in the form of a question for you. What is the truest story for you about your life, about who you are, about your purpose and calling, and about your relationships? That's your last story standing. And it's always true about you, whether you remember it or not. Sometimes we remember it, sometimes we bury it away, sometimes we deny it, sometimes it even haunts us. But that last story standing is that indestructible story about you and your life and your soul, and the key to successful spiritual living and a happy life in general is identifying this last story standing, especially where you're not living it, to greater embody it and bring it about in your life. What is the last story standing about who you are and why you're here? Because when you can identify it, you realize the futility of bothering with any other stories in your life. And it helps us move forward. Now, I find that there's often three ways that we can tell a story to ourselves. The first is to just tell it like it is. You remember Joe Friday from Dragnet, Jack Webb? Just the facts, ma'am. Sometimes it's good just to recognize and let things be exactly as they are without telling a story. The other thing or way that we tell ourselves stories is that we use what takes place in our lives to prove something that we already believe or already fear. It's good when it's positive, but when it's based in paranoia, when it's based in self-doubt and self-beratement, when it's based in distrust, as false as the narrative is, because we're such powerful co-authors in our lives with Spirit, we can make it actually true. Raise your hand if you have siblings, a sibling or siblings, and keep your hand raised if the following is true, that sometimes you wonder if you actually experienced the same childhood together, right? That a lot of the same events happen, but somehow you have completely different stories. Why is that, right? Part of it's temperament. Part of it's why we're here, our purpose, learning. And some of it is these misbeliefs and misconceptions and the sensationalism that we can get to. And it causes us to ask ourselves, and I invite you to ask yourself, are you living a true story? Is your life a true story? What do you mean, Josh? I'm nonfiction, I think, right? But are you living that story that's authentically your own? Are you sure you're not living based on a true story or someone else's story? I love something the author Shelby Foote said. He was a great novelist, and he was a great historian. He wrote incredible historical books about the Civil War. He was made famous in Ken Burns' famous documentary about the Civil War. But he says this, I find it incredibly fascinating. I hope you do too. The point I would make is that the novelist and the historian are seeking the same thing, the truth. Not a different truth, the same truth, only they reach it or try to reach it by different routes. Whether the event took place in a world now gone to dust, preserved by documents and evaluated by scholarship, or in the imagination preserved by memory and distilled by the creative process, they both want to tell us how it was, to recreate it by their separate methods and make it live again in the world around them. It's amazing for me to think that all the stories we tell are trying to get to the truth. But which truth is it for you? Is it the truth that God has in mind for you? Or is it that paranoia, that sensationalism, the drama? See, there's this third kind of story we can tell ourselves, and I'm defining it as your last story standing. I also like to call it your spiritual narrative or God's story in your life. Arthur Schopenhauer was a famous philosopher. He wrote some essays on fate, and in one of them, he makes an interesting observation that it's so interesting to look back at your life and to see how all these seemingly at the time unconnected things somehow fit together to make this great tapestry of your life, like it's a fine novel. Anyone relate to that? And it leaves us with the question, who composed the plot? Right? Who composes your story? Is it blind fate? Is it you and you alone? Is it someone you've given your power away from? Or do you co-author your life with a divine narrator that brings you into life adventure, self-exploration, and the depth of relationships in a way that catches your soul on fire? I'm sure it's true for all of us at a time, maybe true for some of you in this room right now, that in the story of your life, you feel like you're at an ending, or you feel like you're stuck on a page, experiencing the same thing over and over again. You know what the hardest thing to take away from someone is? Their story. Especially if it's a story of victimhood or a story of being broken. Not to say you haven't been victimized, not to say things haven't broken you down, but there's something that happens when we put God back at the center of our lives, when we put the last story standing of who we are and why we're here back on the center of our lives, that turns those pages, that helps us realize that our story is not a throwaway paperback novel. It's not a pulp piece of fiction. It's the greatest story ever told. That the divine chose to express itself in, through, and as you, and has adventures to be told realizations to be had, connections to be made, and great wisdom, great possibility to be brought forth through you. Sound airy-fairy? A little. Thank you. Thank you for your honesty. Well, it doesn't have to be, to recenter our lives on who and what we can be. I want to talk a little bit more about this sensationalism that we get into. And in the 19th century, there was the rise of the newspaper and the rise of what's called yellow journalism. And yellow journalism is when you create a very sensational headline to get someone to buy your paper, right? It's very sensational headline, and then the article itself is partly true to the headline, but it's usually not as dramatic. And so I was preparing notes for the talk last week, and here's a few that I found out there. So from CNN.com, plague games. COVID on the rise in Tokyo before Olympics. So partly true, yes, but a little intense, right? Here's from foxnews.com. They want to spill blood. Texas community on edge as cartels traffic illegal immigrants. So story to be studied, yes. Dramatic headline, right? And here was my personal favorite from Us Weekly. Oh my God. Jennifer Lopez and Ben Affleck share steaming kiss on her birthday. So we see these headlines all the time, but I'm just going to call us on it. Don't we do the same thing in our everyday lives? The littlest thing happens, and we sometimes respond with the most dramatic and sensational of headlines. It's over. Matt is 15 minutes late for the date. I'm a failure. I didn't get the job. Right? We can be so quick to take the smallest of experiences and sensationalize them, seeking to prove that false narrative we know in our heart isn't so, but somehow we can't help but seek to create it in our lives. So what do we do when that happens? For me, the most pragmatic method is that one I mentioned earlier of just be true to what is. Just the facts, right? Matt is 15 minutes late. And when we do that and we don't build that immediate story, we can investigate. We can follow the truth wherever it leads. Maybe Matt's stuck in traffic. Maybe Matt got the time of the date wrong. Maybe Matt is stopping to buy you flowers. We don't know. I didn't get the job. Maybe I didn't interview well. Maybe I was never going to get the job, but just going through the company's motions. Maybe that job isn't the best fit for me anyways. So when we can just release the headline, the dramatic headline, and just get back to the facts, we can begin to investigate so we can have a truer picture of our lives. But the most ideal thing is when we can draw forth on this last story standing, when we can remember our spiritual narrative of who we are and why we're here. Matt is 15 minutes late. My last story standing about relationships is that I'm here to love and be loved in full and complete support. Matt may have some explaining to do. But, there's that story. There's that guide. I didn't get the job. My last story standing is every win and loss comes together to tell the story of my ultimate success in my life. Right? Am I still unhappy I didn't get the job? Yes, but there's that narrative there that helps turn the page. Because how many of us have spent way too much time stuck on the page that not only do we not want to be true in our lives, but know deep down isn't true. So we can move forward in our lives with these spiritual narratives, these last story standings, and uplift ourselves in incredible ways. So 3 great benefits of the last story standing. And the first is that it helps us to remember. Your last story standing helps you to remember, especially in the most challenging of times. What is the last story standing for me about God and life? It's just one word for me: gratitude. I'm so grateful. Is there a lot in life and a lot going on in the world that I'm not grateful for? Absolutely. But when I put the whole thing together, just the fact that in this vast spinning ball of gas that we call the earth through all these millions of years, that the fact that all of us are sharing the sanctuary in person and online, and be that by divine appointment or just random fact, it's still miraculous to me. And I'm so very grateful. That's my last story standing about life. What's my last story standing about myself? About who I am? It's that when I practice my virtues, they've never led me astray. When I've embodied honesty, love, compassion, truth, it's never led me astray. I like how Nick Hornby put it. He said, the truth will set you free, that or it will get you punched in the nose. So sometimes it's challenging. But wherever I've embodied those virtues, things have moved forward for me. What's my last story standing about my work, about career, about purpose? It's that wherever I've shown up willing to be a blessing, I've been blessed beyond imagination. Wherever I've shown up willing to be a blessing, I've been blessed beyond measure. What a gift. And what's my last story standing about relationships? Unconditional love. How important that is to remember when I'm ticked off at my partner. The truth is, I love you. It sounds simple, but easy, strangely, sometimes for some of us to forget. When your darling baby is now a raging teenager, you can know, I don't like you right now, but I love you. And how easy it is to get lost from those true stories in our lives. And so these last story standings, they help us remember. And the important thing too is they get us out of drama and back to our adventure. Get out of drama and back to the adventure of living. And does that make sense that there's a difference between drama and adventure? A drama is where you're avoiding your virtues. It's when Kendall is headed up to here in her marriage, and she's forming an emotional affair with someone else at work whose partner is really mean to them, and didn't you know about that? That's drama. Honesty is Kendall is struggling in her marriage, and she's going to tell her partner that this relationship needs to be about love and support and boundaries and understanding, and are you in or are you out? And the unknown ahead, right? Being willing to. That's that adventure when we reconnect with our virtue, when we understand our last story standing and we bring it about. And here's the interesting thing about spiritual living and your spiritual story. It's the only kind of story where it's okay to give away the ending. It's the only story where it's okay to give away the ending, because that's the last story standing. I love you, no matter what. Wherever I've shown up to be a blessing, I've been blessed. I'm just so grateful, even in the middle of a crazy freaking day. I'm so grateful. And that heart, that spirit comes back into our lives and moves us forward on the adventure we are here for, instead of the drama that we're sick of but somehow can't help but keep going back to. Isn't that funny how comfortable we can get to our misery sometimes because it's comfortable? Gosh, I don't have anything to worry about today. I'm kind of worried about that. Gosh. It's weird to have. It's a real problem to not have any problems today. So, you know what I mean? We get into that thinking, we get into that paranoia, and it's all that defense mechanism against the courage that now is calling us to remember the truth of who we are. The second thing that a last story standing helps us with is it helps us let go. It helps us realize that drama is not as front and center as it needs to be. It helps us let go into something greater. Something our founder, Ernest Holmes, said that I think was one of the most profound things he ever said. He said, you never have to surrender that which belongs to life. You only have to surrender that which is opposed to it. You never have to surrender that which belongs to life, only that which is opposed to it. We could have a great theological conversation about applying that to the concept of immortality. What an interesting idea. But in everyday life, it means that the only things that I have to let go of are the things that aren't serving me or serving me any longer. So I can let go of those and get back to life, realizing that these stories, the dramas, aren't serving me in being and living my real story, why I am really here. I remember I had the honor of working with a woman several years ago who made a decision that was either very sweet or very stupid, maybe a little bit of both. She had been estranged from her father for 15 years and decided to take him back in to her home. He was elderly. It was clear that he only had a year or so to live, and she just felt called to do it. And she came to see me, and this is, I share it because it's kind of funny because she was one of the sweetest ladies I've ever met. And she said, Josh, I'm around him for 5 minutes and I just want to kill him. I'm just filled with such anger. And he doesn't even have to do anything. This anger comes up. And it was all tied to the story that was very valid in her experience, that all she had ever wanted in her life was her father to love her, to support her, to see her, and be proud of her. And he was just bad at him. He just wasn't capable of doing it in the way that she needed. And it built this story up in her life where she struggled in every relationship that she had after that. She struggled in her relationships with men. She struggled in her relationships with authority figures, all because she was still looking for support from the source that couldn't give it to her. And so she made a couple choices and a couple practices that I thought were really powerful. The first is she affirmed that she would release this man from the role of father. I'm going to release him from the role of father and see him for who he is, which is a very nice and frail man who needs help and support. Not easy to do. Takes a lot of practice, but there's something really powerful about that. And the second thing is she was going to build and articulate this last story standing, which was that I am loved and supported by the universe. I am loved and supported by the universe. And she was going to practice not just looking to the sources that couldn't give her what she wanted, but to begin to see the whole universe and everything in it as a source of love and support and care for her. Be it through a relationship or the shining of the sun, she was going to open up her receptivity. And life started changing dramatically for her, almost immediately. So much so, and I know it doesn't happen in every case, she shared that in her father's last days, she truly finally felt loved by him and cared for by him. They had finally, after all these years, connected. Could it be that there is a story you're telling yourself that's keeping you from the real story you were born to live? Could it be that we're stuck on a page thinking it's the end of the book when there are many, many chapters after, if we're just willing to let go and do that work to turn the page? The last thing about a last story standing that makes it so helpful is that it inspires us to reach higher. Our last story standing inspires us to reach higher. Last story standings are not for those who just want a simple and comfortable life. Last story standings demand courage. They demand recognizing what's not present in your life right now and being willing to be present for it, even if you're the only one that is. It's being present for that greater life, that greater adventure that wants to come through you, even if it means letting go a lot of the creature comforts of your life. There's a simple story I love about a young teenage boy in Alabama in the early 1960s. And during the civil rights movement there. And he signs the famous pledge for the Alabama Christian movement for human rights that's said to have been written by Martin Luther King Jr. And it says things like, I will protest but non-violently. I will meditate every day. I will put myself out there for greater peace for all people, even if it means hurt, physical hurt for myself. So it's not an easy pledge to make. And this young boy sits with his dad and tells him he's signed this pledge and he's going to go and protest. And his dad absolutely forbids him. That is so dangerous. You can't do that. You know, you think of all these great civil rights leaders. I pause sometimes and I think about their parents, right? Like we should have Martin Luther King Jr. Day, but I think we need a holiday for Mr. and Mrs. King as well, because it's so scary to see someone you love put themselves in harm's way. So the father forbids it, and the son says this, Daddy, I don't want to disobey you, but I've made my pledge. If you try to keep me home, I will sneak off. If you think I deserve to be punished for that, I'll just have to take the punishment. For you see, I'm not doing this only because I want to be free. I'm doing it also because I want freedom for you and Mama, and I want it to come before you die." And the father gave his blessing. There's all those conventional rules we're supposed to follow, all of those common sense status quo things, but sometimes there's laws and callings of the Spirit that demand that we bend those, that demand that we transcend some of the challenges that we see around us to bring forth that greater amount of hope for you and for me and for one another. And so I would invite you today to consider as well, what is your last story standing? That spiritual narrative that's been that golden thread showing up in your life over and over again as these incredible themes, whether you've been aware of it or not. What is it calling you into? And so you heard them from me, but I'm going to put these statements back up here on the screen as we close and just invite you to ask yourself, what is your last story standing about what God and life is for you? And where right now in your life would it be a good place to apply that last story standing? What is your truest story about who you are? And where in your life right now are you called to become it, to embody that much stronger? What's your last story standing about your calling, your purpose, your work, what you're here to do and bring forth in the world? Where are you called to apply that? And in your relationships, and the ones that are just lovely today, but in particular the ones that might be driving you crazy. What is the last story standing about that relationship that you can remind yourself of and be an opening to come forward? And lastly, back to that question, are you willing to see your life as something that you co-create and co-author with a divine presence? A presence that can demonstrate miracles, a presence that can demonstrate healings, a presence that can demonstrate a sense of wholeness even in your most broken moments. A divine grace, always there, always turning the page, always leading you onward if you're willing to co-create as well. So just moving into a prayer today, I invite you to join me if you choose. Invite all of our practitioner prayer partners who are present and would like to stand and join me to do that as well. These incredible prayer partners will be up front on stage to help say a prayer for your last story standing and remembering it today. How beautiful and how magnificent are those moments when I am able to see life not as I've judged it, but in the beauty of what it really is. I am so grateful for those moments of clarity, those moments where I have the opportunity to know as I am known by the divine, to see from a vision of wholeness, not just my own life, but all of humanity and all of this world. Knowing that by catching this vision, I become a conduit for it to come about. I know it demonstrates his healing in relationships. I know it demonstrates his courage in the social spheres. And I know it demonstrates his deep inner peace, inner trust, and inner grace as I accept myself as I am in the divine. Knowing and affirming the spiritual narrative of each and every person here is one that can only guide to greater good. The only question is, how soon will I let it? Opening up to this incredible thing called life, may we know these things as true for ourselves and those we love. Feeling that love, feeling that grace, feeling that letting go, that forgiveness, that rejuvenation of being, and stepping into the holy now, the holy unknown, and yet the holy certain. That indeed there is a divine all is wellness right here and right now, moving us forward, moving us inward with inspiration and a divine joy that we celebrate this day. And so it is. Amen. Thanks for listening to the Mile High Church podcast. This podcast is made possible by the generous contributions from listeners like you. To make a donation, please visit milehighchurch.org.